Just 1 month after my mother passed away, my dad started dating someone new. At first, we thought it was odd, just a little strange, but then she started showing up on weekends, at family gatherings, in our lives. And suddenly, everything I thought I knew about family, about love, about loyalty, began to unravel. Could I ever accept someone else stepping into the space my mother had left behind? I remember the exact moment when life as I knew it fractured. It was February, bitter cold for our small town in the Midwest. Snowflakes clung stubbornly to the bare branches outside my bedroom window, each flake a tiny whisper of loss. Inside, the house felt impossibly quiet, almost hollow. The laughter that once echoed through these halls, the laughter of my mother, the soft hum of family life was gone. I could still hear it if I concentrated, like a ghost that refused to leave. But it wasn't really there. My mother had passed away after a long battle with illness, and the shock of it was still settling into every corner of my body. Mom had been married to my father for 38 years. Their love wasn't always loud or dramatic, but it was steady, like the slow, patient flow of a river. It was the kind of love that anchored a family. And now, without her, that anchor had vanished. My siblings and I clung to each other in ways that were both comforting and suffocating. There were moments when we laughed, forced smiles, trying to convince ourselves that we were okay. And then there were the nights-long, quiet nights when we would each retreat into our own rooms and allow ourselves to truly feel the grief that had been simmering just beneath the surface. I, at 20, felt the weight of the world differently. Now, my mother wasn't just gone. She had been our glue, our protector, our confidant. Losing her was like losing the very air we breathed. Our house smelled faintly of her perfume, even weeks after she had passed. Every corner reminded me of her presence. The kitchen where she would hum as she cooked. The living room where she read quietly in her favorite chair. The backyard where she tended to her roses with such gentle hands. I would walk through the house and catch myself expecting her voice, a soft call from the hallway, a question about my day. But there was only silence. In the first few weeks after the funeral, my siblings and I clung to routines, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. We cooked together, we ate together, we shared stories about Mom, laughing at the same jokes she used to tell. We grieved, yes, but it was almost comforting, in a way, to have each other. And then came the moment that fractured us further. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. My dad, who had been quiet, withdrawn, spending long hours in his study, began to change. He started checking his phone more often, stepping out for walks with a strange lightness in his step. At first, we thought perhaps he was just trying to cope, maybe even looking for support from friends. But the feeling in the pit of my stomach told me it was something else. Something that didn't belong. So soon after our mother's death, it wasn't long before he confessed, as if expecting no judgment, that he had reconnected with someone from his past. Someone he had known years ago, even before Mom and Dad married. The timing was almost inconceivable. Just 1 month after Mom's passing, and he was talking to someone new. My siblings and I exchanged glances, disbelief mirrored in our eyes, the words unspoken but hanging heavy between us. Is this real? Is this happening? At first, he framed it casually, almost innocently. They were just friends talking, he said. And perhaps that was true, at least at first. But then the patterns became undeniable. Weekends he had once spent with us, remembering Mom, going through old photos, sitting with us in quiet mourning. These weekends were replaced with trips. Trips to Ohio, where she lived. Trips that were justified as visiting a friend, yet the frequency and duration were unsettling. Friday evenings he would leave and not return until Monday mornings. Each absence felt like a silent betrayal, a wedge slowly being driven into the fragile structure of our grieving family. My siblings tried to rationalize it. Maybe he needs someone, they said. Maybe this is just how he's coping. But coping shouldn't hurt the people left behind. Coping shouldn't feel like erasing the memory of the one who just passed. I remember the first time I saw her face, even before meeting her in person. It was in a video, a recording of Mom's funeral that had been uploaded to social media by a distant relative. She had seen it, reached out, messaging my father on Facebook. She asked how he was doing. She said she wanted to check on him, wanted to be there for him. And I felt it immediately, a pang of fear, sharp and cold, cutting straight through me. That was the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, one I was not ready to read. The beginning of a story where the lines between love, loyalty, grief, and betrayal would blur. And I, at 20, was forced to navigate this uncharted territory, to witness the father I knew step into a life that seemed to push us the children further and further away. The weeks following Mom's funeral were like living in a fog. Every sound in the house seemed muted, every light dimmed, and every laugh we shared felt fragile, as though it could shatter at the slightest provocation. My siblings and I moved through the days in a trance of grief, sometimes talking about Mom, sometimes sitting in silence, allowing the emptiness to fill the spaces she once occupied. And then the subtle signs began. It started with the phone. My dad, who had been so withdrawn, now began scrolling through his phone with a strange focus, sometimes smiling faintly, sometimes tapping out messages late at night. At first, I thought it was just boredom or an attempt to distract himself, a natural response to grief. But the truth revealed itself gradually, insidiously, in tiny increments. One evening, as I passed by the living room, I noticed him sitting at his desk with his laptop open. There was a soft glow from the screen illuminating his face, a small smile playing on his lips that made my chest tighten. He was messaging someone from his past. A woman he had known long before Mom. A woman whose name I had heard only once briefly, in passing during a family dinner years ago. And now, here she was, present in a way that felt like a shadow stretching across the room, across our grief. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I retreated to my room, the familiar smell of Mom's perfume lingering faintly in the air, clutching a pillow to my chest. My mind raced with questions. Was this normal? Was it possible to grieve someone and simultaneously seek the comfort of someone else? Could he do that without it feeling like betrayal? The messages escalated over the next few days. My dad began stepping out more frequently, citing errands or casual visits, but the pattern was undeniable. Friday evenings he would leave, returning Monday mornings. And during these trips, he spoke of this woman in tones that were neither secretive nor discreet. He framed her as a friend checking in, a confidant in times of loneliness. But the warmth in his words, the glint in his eye when he mentioned her, left little room for doubt. I began noticing the small details that signaled her creeping presence into our lives. There were packages arriving for him at the house, carefully addressed and marked with familiar handwriting. There were phone calls that he answered with a soft chuckle, a tone I hadn't heard in months, one that seemed to belong to a different life. A different world, one where Mom was still alive. And we were not grappling with this unbearable loss. My siblings noticed it too, though our responses varied. My older brother tried to rationalize it. Maybe he just needs someone, he said, his voice cautious, as if the admission might tear the fragile fabric of our family apart. My sister, more protective of me than of herself, frowned and shook her head, clearly uneasy but unwilling to say anything. I, on the other hand, felt an almost physical unease every time I saw the two of them. My father and this woman began to occupy the same mental space in my mind. The first time I actually saw her photograph, it was on my father's social media profile. She had seen a video of Mom's funeral uploaded by a distant relative. She had commented, expressing concern, asking if he was okay. Her tone was polite, considerate, almost charming. And that is when the sharp pang of fear struck me. She had entered our lives at a moment of extreme vulnerability, at a time when my father and we, his children, were raw with grief. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining her voice speaking to him, her laughter echoing in our home, her presence filling the spaces that should have been reserved for Mom. I imagined the weekend trips, the visits, the texts, the calls. And with each image, the knot in my stomach tightened. I began watching my father more closely, a silent observer to every subtle sign of intimacy forming. The way he would linger a second longer on certain messages, the gentle smiles that he tried to hide when he thought no one was looking. It was as if the world had shifted on its axis, and we were all orbiting a new center, one that did not include Mom. There were conversations I tried to have with my siblings, tentative and cautious, as if the words themselves were fragile. Do you think maybe it's too soon? I asked one evening, my voice barely above a whisper. My brother sighed and shook his head. It's complicated, he said, and in his eyes I saw the same disbelief mirrored that I felt in myself. We tried to carry on, to preserve some sense of normalcy. We still gathered for meals, still shared stories about Mom, still laughed at the memories we had of her. But an invisible tension had settled over us. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was the creeping realization that our family was changing, whether we liked it or not. That even in her absence, Mom's place in our lives was being challenged, and yet, despite everything, I knew deep down that my father had the right to move on in his own way. The conflict wasn't about morality or entitlement. It was about timing, about the rawness of the wound, about the delicate balance between honoring the past and navigating the present. But acknowledging that truth didn't make the sting any less sharp. It didn't make the weekend trips, the messages, or the whispered laughter any easier to bear. The first time I truly felt the magnitude of what was happening was when my father casually mentioned her during a Sunday dinner. He said it with a calmness that suggested it was ordinary, natural, inevitable. "I've been talking to an old friend," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "She reached out after the funeral, and we've been keeping in touch." The room went silent. My fork hovered midway to my mouth. My siblings exchanged uneasy glances, and I felt a jolt of something I couldn't quite name. Betrayal? Anger? Grief multiplied? It was all of it, and none of it, all at once. It was the first real crack in the armor of our mourning, the first undeniable sign that life, even in the wake of death, refuses to pause for anyone. And in that moment, I understood that the journey ahead would not just be about grieving my mother. It would be about navigating a new and uncomfortable reality, one where love, loss, and loyalty collided in ways I had never anticipated. The days blurred together after that dinner. I woke up to the same quiet house, the lingering scent of Mom's perfume, almost comforting, almost cruel. Every morning, I found myself walking past her favorite chair in the living room, half expecting to see her curled up with a book. And every morning, I remembered that she wasn't there. My siblings tried to hold the family together, but the cracks were visible. My older brother spent long hours at work, claiming to need the distraction. My younger sister retreated to her room more often, headphones in, music loud enough to block the world out. And I, caught somewhere in the middle, became a silent observer, cataloging every change, every small intrusion into the delicate pattern of our grieving life. The subtle tension in the house was almost palpable. It wasn't loud or confrontational, it was in the way my father lingered at the doorframe, phone in hand, checking messages, smiling softly to himself. It was in the way the mail would sometimes include letters or small packages addressed to him from someone who was not Mom. And it was in the way my siblings and I would exchange quick, uncertain glances, never quite daring to speak the thoughts that were swimming just below the surface. I found myself scrutinizing every detail of my father's interactions. The way he would laugh quietly when reading a message, the soft inflection in his voice when he mentioned her name, the way he sometimes seemed lost in thought, almost absent. Even when we were sitting together at the dinner table, every small gesture felt magnified, every smile directed at her seemed to stretch across the room and brush against the raw edges of my grief. I tried to carry on with my own life, throwing myself into school and my part-time job. College became a refuge, a place where I could exist without constantly monitoring my father's behavior. But even there, the shadow of her presence was impossible to ignore. Text messages from my father during class, brief phone calls to check in, occasional mentions of Ohio, of weekends he'd be away, reminded me that the world at home was shifting, whether I liked it or not. One afternoon, I sat in the campus coffee shop, nursing a latte and staring at the window as snow began to fall again. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, not just the snow, but the inevitability of change, the intrusion of this new woman into the private world of my family. I wondered how Mom would have felt, how she would have handled it. Would she have laughed it off, giving my father permission to find comfort? Or would she have been silently furious, rolling her eyes at the audacity of someone entering our lives so soon after her death? It wasn't just the weekends that were affected. Even small ordinary moments at home carried the undercurrent of tension. Watching my father sip his morning coffee while scrolling through his phone, glancing occasionally at her messages, made my stomach twist. I found myself imagining scenarios: her presence at family gatherings, her voice laughing in the living room, the way she might sit in Mom's chair, unknowingly, innocently, yet impossibly occupying space that no one could replace. The family conversations became increasingly cautious. We avoided mentioning her outright, as if speaking her name would summon some uncomfortable reality into the room. But even unspoken, the tension lingered. One evening, my father mentioned her again while we were watching a rerun of one of Mom's favorite sitcoms. His words were casual, almost rehearsed. "She sent me a recipe for chocolate chip cookies the other day. I think I might try it this weekend." The words hung in the air like smoke. I couldn't respond immediately. I felt anger, betrayal, confusion, grief all at once. My siblings exchanged uneasy glances, their silence echoing my own. And in that moment, the house felt smaller, tighter, the walls pressing in, as if the very air around us was aware of the fracture forming within the family. Sleep became erratic. I would lie awake, imagining the weekends, imagining the visits, imagining her laughter mingling with our memories of Mom. I questioned myself constantly. Was I being unreasonable? Was it selfish to feel hurt by my father's attempts at comfort, his attempts at moving forward? I wanted to be rational, to understand him, but understanding didn't make the ache in my chest any lighter. One night, unable to sleep, I ventured into the kitchen. The cold linoleum floor pressed against my bare feet, the hum of the refrigerator loud in the quiet house. I found my father there, standing by the counter with his laptop open. He looked up and smiled, and for a moment, I was struck by the normalcy of it. But then I saw the messages on the screen, the casual warmth, and the weight returned. I didn't speak. I didn't want to. The silence between us became a language of its own, a language that said everything I couldn't put into words. And as I watched him close the laptop and walk away, I realized that the presence of this other woman wasn't just a phase or a distraction. She was becoming a part of our lives, quietly, slowly, and irrevocably. Over the next few weeks, the pattern solidified. Friday evenings became departures, Monday mornings returns. My father's absence during those nights was a reminder of the life outside our grieving family, a life that he was beginning to embrace, even as we were still trapped in mourning. The house felt emptier, colder, and somehow more fragile than ever before. I tried to hold on to the moments that still felt ours. Family dinners, late-night conversations, small shared jokes about Mom's quirks, but each one was tinged with the awareness of the inevitable. Change was coming, whether we were ready or not. And the presence of this woman, subtle at first, now pressing into every corner of our lives, made the future feel uncertain, fragile, and frighteningly unpredictable. The tension had been building for weeks, simmering under the surface of our grieving household like a storm about to break. Every Friday, when my father left for Ohio, the emptiness in the house seemed to swell, stretching across the walls, filling the spaces where laughter used to live. Every Monday when he returned, there was a quiet unease, a subtle shift in the air, that reminded us we were no longer alone in our grief. I could no longer ignore it. The small, polite mentions of her name, the fleeting smiles at messages, the subtle light in his eyes when he thought we weren't watching it all built up like a pressure cooker inside me. One Sunday evening, after dinner, I finally decided I couldn't stay silent any longer. My siblings hovered near the doorway, hesitant, as if sensing the confrontation that was about to unfold. I walked into the living room, where he was sitting in his usual chair, a mug of coffee in hand. My heart pounded, the words caught in my throat before they spilled out. "Dad, we need to talk." He looked up, calm, almost too calm, as if he had been expecting this moment, though I knew he hadn't. "About what?" he asked softly, setting down the mug. "About her," I said, the word heavy in the air. "About this woman you've been talking to and visiting. You've barely been home. We feel like you're moving on too fast. Too soon," he sighed, leaning back in the chair, and I saw the flicker of patience or maybe weariness in his eyes. "I understand how you feel," he said, "but you have to understand. I lost her too. Your mother was my wife, my partner, my life, and I'm allowed to feel lonely, to seek comfort. That doesn't mean I love her any less, or that I'm trying to replace her." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I wanted to understand. I wanted to empathize, but the raw, twisting ache in my chest made it impossible to speak logically. "It's not just about that," I said, my voice trembling. "It's about timing. It's about respect for her memory, for all of us. We're still grieving, Dad. We're still here. And you're acting like life just goes on without us." He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging a truth he hadn't wanted to confront. "I don't mean to hurt you," he said, "but I can't put my life on hold. I can't pretend she's still here when she's not. I'm trying to survive too." The room fell silent, heavy with words unsaid. My siblings shifted uncomfortably, caught between loyalty to Mom and understanding of Dad. I could feel their judgment and their fear echoing the confusion in my own mind. We were all adrift, caught between grief and the inevitable march of life. I don't know if I can accept her, I said finally, almost whispering, tears brimming. Not now. Maybe not ever. He reached out, his hand resting lightly on mine. I don't want you to accept her, he said quietly. Not yet. I just want you to understand that I'm still your father, that I'm still here. And that doesn't have to change, no matter who comes into my life. The words were meant to comfort, and in part they did. But the knot in my chest didn't loosen. How could it? She wasn't just a friend anymore. She was becoming a presence, a person whose existence now intersected with ours, whose shadow stretched over our weekends, our holidays, our family traditions. I glanced toward my siblings, who were silent but watching intently. I knew they felt the same storm I did: hurt, confusion, and a fierce loyalty to Mom that refused to waver. The family we had once known, secure and predictable, was now fractured, its pieces drifting in directions none of us were ready for. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the heating system and the occasional creak of the house settling. I tried to process it all: the grief, the anger, the fear, the faint glimmers of understanding. I tried to imagine how this could possibly work, how we could coexist with this new reality without tearing ourselves apart. The truth settled over me like a heavy blanket. Life was moving forward, with or without our permission. My father was allowed to seek companionship. We were allowed to feel hurt and conflicted. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I needed to find a way to navigate this delicate balance, to protect my grief, honor my mother's memory, and still hold on to my father as my parent, not just a man moving on. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, tried to quiet the storm inside me. But the house was different now, the family was different now, and I knew, deep down, that nothing would ever feel entirely the same again. The first time I saw her in person, it was like the world tilted slightly on its axis. She wasn't just a name on a screen, a voice over the phone, or a message on Facebook anymore. She was there, standing in our house. My father introduced her with a calmness that seemed almost rehearsed, as if this was perfectly natural, and I, along with my siblings, were just extras in a scene we hadn't auditioned for. Her smile was polite, practiced, yet there was warmth there. She extended her hand, soft and deliberate. "It's so nice to finally meet you," she said, her voice carrying the soft accent of Ohio. My father beamed, his eyes crinkling in a way I hadn't seen in months. But all I could see were the empty spaces, the chair that should have been Mom's, the pictures on the wall that no longer felt like ours. We made small talk. She asked about school, about work, about my siblings. She laughed at the right moments, nodded at the right cues. And all the while, I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. She wasn't doing anything wrong, she was just existing. And that existence was more than enough to challenge the fragile balance we had tried to maintain in our grieving family. After that first meeting, weekends became complicated. My father spent more and more time planning trips, not just to Ohio, but around visits to her. Friday evenings, he'd leave. Monday mornings, he'd return. And now, the house felt invaded. Even small things: the way she laughed on the phone, the way she appeared in video calls, made the air heavier. I tried to keep my own life separate, retreating to my room, losing myself in studies, music, or any task that could occupy my mind. But no matter how hard I tried, she was there. In his voice, in his smile, in the faint scent of perfume that seemed to linger long after he returned. One Saturday evening, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. Her laugh carried through the hallway, light and airy, and I felt my chest tighten. My siblings were tense too. My brother muttered under his breath, "Is this too soon?" And I nodded silently, wishing the floor would swallow me up. It wasn't just the presence of a new person, it was the rapid pace of it, the speed at which she seemed to enter the life we had all shared. The speed made it impossible to process, impossible to accept, impossible to understand. Then, the announcement came. My father and she were engaged. A ring, a promise, a plan to build a life together. And with that, everything escalated. The home, the memories, the family, all seemed suddenly under threat of replacement. I remember the day he told us. He sat us down in the living room, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "We're engaged," he said, smiling gently. "We want you to be part of this." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Part of this?" I whispered. "How can we be part of this when When mom just died? When nothing feels normal anymore. My siblings were equally stunned. My brother clenched his fists. My sister's face went pale. And yet, my father remained calm, almost serene, as if he had rehearsed the moment hundreds of times in his mind. It was the first real crack in our family's facade of stability. Emotions that had been simmering under the surface erupted. Anger, confusion, fear, grief, even guilt at feeling these emotions towards someone who was, in a sense, only trying to exist kindly. The next blow came when we learned they were planning to build a house near ours. Not just anywhere but close to us, close to the life we had lived, close to the memories that were still raw and tender. I couldn't sleep that night, lying in bed, imagining her stepping into our world every day, sharing spaces, filling the same neighborhoods, the same streets as us. I imagined running into her at local stores, seeing her car parked outside, hearing her laugh carry across our yard. It was more than a presence now, it was a looming, unavoidable reality. We tried to voice our discomfort, politely at first. Maybe give us some space, I suggested one evening, trembling but determined. My father nodded, acknowledging the request, but making no promises. And in that silence, I realized our lives were no longer entirely our own. She was here to stay, and we would have to navigate this new, uncharted family terrain. The tension was palpable. Every visit, every call, every small interaction carried the weight of our grief, our loyalty to mom, and the fear of losing the world as we knew it. It wasn't just about acceptance anymore, it was about survival, emotional survival in a family that was slowly, irreversibly changing. The night of the dinner felt like stepping into a battlefield disguised as a dining room. The table was set with care-polished silverware, soft candlelight, and mom's favorite china still carefully stacked in the cabinet, a silent reminder of what was lost. My siblings and I moved cautiously, like intruders in our own home. She arrived smiling, carrying a small dish she had cooked herself. I thought we could try something new, she said cheerfully, setting it down next to Dad. He beamed at her, and I felt my stomach tighten. The first few minutes were painfully polite. She asked about school, about our jobs, about trivial things that normally would have seemed normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every laugh she let slip, every careful glance at my father, felt like a knife to a wound that was still raw. I tried to mask my feelings, forcing a smile, but inside, I was screaming. My younger sister couldn't hide her unease. Her fingers drummed nervously on the table. My older brother, stoic as always, kept his eyes fixed on his plate, jaw tight, silently judging. Then came the casual comment that broke the fragile calm. "I think your dad and I might look for a house nearby," she said lightly, as if discussing the weather. The room froze. I could hear the faint tick of the clock on the wall, my heartbeat thundering louder than anything else. My father cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. Nearby, I whispered, barely able to get the words out. "Do you realize how fast this is? How wrong it feels?" She blinked, genuinely confused. "I didn't mean to upset anyone," she said softly. "I just want to be part of the family." Part of me wanted to scream, to tell her to leave, to vanish, to disappear from this world entirely. But I held my tongue. The tension crackled like electricity in the air, every unspoken word heavier than any spoken one. A week later, the arguments began. Small disagreements at first, where to eat, how to spend weekends, but quickly escalating into full-blown conflicts. My father defended her gently but firmly. "She's not replacing your mother," he said repeatedly. "She's just someone I care about." But we couldn't see it that way. "Someone you care about?" I shouted one evening. "She's invading our lives. Mom just died. Don't you feel anything? Don't you think about what's fair?" He rubbed his temples, weary. "I do feel it. I feel everything. But living in the past won't bring her back. I'm still your father." That hasn't changed. My siblings took sides in subtle and spoken ways. My older brother's silence was one of defiance. My younger sister avoided the house altogether during some weekends, retreating into friends' homes. And I felt caught between my love for him, my grief for Mom, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Even small gestures became battlegrounds. A smile she gave, a joke shared, a glance across the room, it all set off alarms in my chest. I questioned myself constantly. Was I being unreasonable? Was it okay to feel this level of resentment towards someone who, in another context, was only trying to connect? The emotional isolation was intense. I spent long nights awake, listening to the faint hum of the heater, staring at the ceiling, replaying memories of Mom, her laugh, her soft voice, the way she used to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear. It all felt like a shadow looming over the present. I began journaling to cope, pouring out the conflict, the hurt, the confusion. Words spilled across pages. How can life move on so fast? How can he laugh, plan, love someone else when she just left? There were fleeting moments of guilt. Maybe he deserves happiness too. But the guilt collided with anger. Not like this. Not now. Not so soon. Not while we're still reeling. Even friends who visited felt the tension. The house felt claustrophobic, weighed down by memories, by unspoken rules, by the intrusion of someone new into sacred space. The breaking point came unexpectedly one Saturday evening. I had been visiting my father while she was also there, and something trivial, a misplaced dish, a comment about weekend plans, triggered a full emotional eruption. I can't do this anymore, I shouted, tears streaming. I can't pretend everything is fine when nothing feels fine. She's not Mom. She will never be Mom. And yet you act like she can just step in. My father's face tightened with pain and frustration. Stop, he said, voice cracking. Stop blaming her for trying to connect. Stop blaming me for living. This isn't just about her. This is about all of us trying to survive. My siblings watched, silent, shocked. The room vibrated with raw emotion, every word, every pause heavy with grief and resentment. In that moment, I realized something crucial. Life had moved forward without our permission. Love and grief could coexist, but the balance was delicate, painful, and impossible to control. We were all navigating a storm, unsure of the outcome. The night ended with no resolution, only exhaustion, tears, and the faint awareness that nothing would ever be the same again. And yet, somewhere deep down, I knew this was just the beginning, the first of many confrontations, adjustments, and reconciliations that lay ahead. The invitation arrived on a crisp autumn morning, slipping silently between the bills and mailers in the hallway. I stared at it for what felt like hours, my fingers trembling slightly. The words were polite, elegant, and impossible to ignore. We would be honored to have you at our wedding in Ohio this December. My heart raced. My father's handwriting, neat and precise, felt almost cruel in its civility. I could picture them planning, laughing, dreaming, and somehow the invitation felt like a declaration. The world had moved on, whether I was ready or not. I showed it to my siblings in the living room. Silence followed. My older brother's jaw tightened. My sister's lips pressed into a thin line. We all felt the same mix of anger, grief, and incredulity. How could they ask this of us? How could he ask me to witness her stepping fully into our lives, into the space Mom had once occupied? I wrestled with conflicting emotions, love for my father, loyalty to my mother, resentment toward her, and fear of losing my own sense of family. The invitation was more than paper, it was a challenge, a test of my ability to accept reality as it had become. Weeks passed before I made a decision to attend, or at least, to consider it. The thought of Ohio haunted me, the long drive, the small town streets, the house near ours, the sight of her there, smiling, claiming her place. I packed carefully, almost ritualistically, as if each item could armor me against the emotional storm ahead. Clothes folded neatly, journals tucked into the backpack, photos of Mom hidden in my drawer, reminders of what had been lost. The car ride was silent. My siblings didn't want to speak. I couldn't either. Every mile toward Ohio felt like a journey into a new dimension of my grief, a reality I hadn't consented to but could no longer ignore. Arriving at their home, I felt a strange sense of surrealism. The house was warm, welcoming, beautifully decorated. The smell of fresh flowers, soft music, and the faint aroma of baking filled the air. And there she was, standing with my father, smiling as if everything were perfectly natural. December arrived, bringing with it snowflakes and brittle cold. The wedding venue, a charming chapel on a small hill in Ohio, was decorated with soft lights, evergreen garlands, and delicate ribbons. The world looked serene, almost too perfect, contrasting sharply with the turmoil inside me. I watched as my father walked down the aisle, hand in hand with the woman who had replaced the void in his life. The officiant spoke words about love, commitment, and partnership, and I felt my chest tighten with a storm of emotions, grief, anger, sadness, but also a strange undercurrent of relief. sitting in the pew. I felt my siblings beside me, silent but present. We were witnesses, not participants. The ceremony proceeded, each vow she spoke carving a place for herself in our lives. Each smile she shared a reminder of what had changed irreversibly. After the ceremony, the reception was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the low hum of conversation. I found a quiet corner, staring at the snow outside, trying to process the paradox. Love and grief could coexist, but never in equal measure. My father came to me, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. "I know this isn't easy," he said softly. "I don't expect you to love her. I just hope you can understand and know that my love for you, for all of you, hasn't changed." I nodded, tears in my eyes, feeling an unexpected mix of emotions: anger, sorrow, frustration, but also a fragile sense of clarity. Life had moved forward, and I could either fight it or find a way to exist within it. By the end of the evening, I realized something profound. Acceptance didn't mean forgetting Mom. It didn't mean pretending she hadn't been the anchor of our family. It meant acknowledging that life continued, that love could take new forms, and that my father's happiness didn't erase the past. As the night drew to a close, I stepped outside, the snow crunching under my boots, and felt the cold bite at my cheeks. And for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of peace. Life had changed irrevocably, yes, but maybe, just maybe, I could navigate this new reality without losing myself.